areas that got hit so horrible with the river flooding in the days that remained. So we had a couple of crews out at the coast, and once the storm pulled away and the sky got bluer, we had to shift the crews and okay, we're going to go cover the floods now. So some of our reporters stayed and did that in the Fayetteville area. Much like with Florence, it was that rising water that became the big problem in the days following.
Yeah, I remember the Lumberton area in particular because we spent a lot of time there with crews in the Lumber River. And the thing I remember about Matthew is because of Florence. Because in Matthew, I remember going to a house, and a lady had lived there for several generations. Like they were the second or third generation in that home. They had never flooded before, Tim. And in Matthew, they flooded. And you told them this is like a generational flood. And then not 2 years later, we went back to the same location. The house was being rebuilt from Matthew, and it flooded again in Florence. And this time they said they weren't coming back. They were like, that's it. We've had two generational floods. But yeah, that poor Lumberton area, it was back-to-back storms that really just clobbered them in 2 years. And some of the worst flooding I'd ever seen on a river. And it was there for days. That's the other thing I remember. That water did not go down for a long time. And that has a lot to do with the geography of eastern North Carolina. The water does not subside very quickly because it's just flat.
It was fast and furious. Some places got 18, 19 inches of rain in not a very long period of time. So it was an enormous amount of water. The gusts were pretty bad along the coastline, but again, the rain was the issue. And the water. I know the Spring-Made Pier was pretty much destroyed in Myrtle during this storm. The pier in some of my videos here, they did okay. It was actually interesting. The day after, the owner of the fishing pier there kind of let us walk on even though it was closed, and he showed us how they constructed it. They used straight up and down nails on I'm zooming out here, sorry. They use straight up and down nails so that the waves can just punch the boards up, and then it doesn't really take the whole pier with it. So they use nails, not screws, to kind of help it to be a little bit more structurally flexible. So that pier did okay, but it was a big bad storm with waves, biggest waves I've seen in my life with my own two eyes for sure.
Yeah, I had forgotten about how bad the surge was down there in parts of South Carolina and coastal North Carolina until reading up this morning, and because I remember the rainfall. But you're right, the surge was a big part of this on the coast. So that was back in 2016. So thanks, Tim. We're running out of time here. Stick around. I think we do have some breaking news coming up in the next hour with Vanessa right here on WCNC Plus.
Folks, thanks for joining us here on Live Impact News. As you can see, just moments away from a special report from NBC as we are hearing Israel and Hamas have signed off on the first phase of a Gaza peace deal. We're going to bring you now to Tom Yamas.
President Trump has just announced that Israel and Hamas have agreed to the first phase of a peace plan that eventually could end the war in Gaza. The president writing on Truth Social, quote, Israel and Hamas have both signed off on the first phase of our peace plan. This means that all of the hostages will be released very soon, and Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed-upon line as the first steps towards a strong, durable, and everlasting peace. This agreement comes after negotiators from Hamas, Israel, and the U.S. held indirect peace talks in Egypt this week. Just yesterday, Israel marked 2 years since the deadly October 7th attack that sparked the war. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel joins us now live from Jerusalem tonight. Richard, these are key developments that have happened so far in these peace negotiations. This handover of hostages is very complicated. Walk our viewers through what we think will happen. And again, this is all very fluid.
So it is very fluid. It is developing very quickly. Negotiations have been happening in Egypt all day long, and we've been getting positive reports. And then just a few hours ago, there was that moment in the White House when President Trump was interrupted. He was handed a note saying that he needed to approve a Truth Social post so that he could announce a deal. And then you just read that post, and it seems that Israel and Hamas have now agreed to implement a plan that they had already agreed in principle to, but now they have agreed to carry it out. And the first phase will see Hamas releasing all of the hostages it is still holding, 20 living hostages. Hamas has said that it will take a little bit more time to recover the remains of the other hostages who perished while in captivity. But this is a critical development. If Hamas does go ahead and carry this out, and there are all indications at this stage that they will do this quite soon, it will create a lot of momentum. Also part of this deal, as you just mentioned, as Hamas releases these hostages, the 20 living hostages who are in terrible condition. They've been held in Gaza for 2 years now, that Israeli troops will pull back out of populated areas, pull back to agreed lines, agreed upon in these negotiations that are still ongoing. That creates momentum. And then the idea would be to move to the next phase, phase 2, phase 3, about to when you're talking about the reconstruction of Gaza, the future of Hamas, and the future governance of the Gaza Strip. But these are major developments, and it could happen quite quickly, Tom. Once they've agreed, then you just need to work out the logistics, how to carry out a handover. It means we could see this happen and hostages actually coming home over the next couple of days.
Richard, we have been reporting that when this first peace plan, these talks started, there was some confusion, right? Because there are some hostages obviously held by Hamas. There are other hostages that are held by other rebel groups aligned with Hamas. Communication within Gaza has been largely destroyed. Is it clear, it might still be unclear at this point, if everyone is quote unquote on the same page at this hour? Because one of the peace plan points, as you had mentioned here, was sort of a 72-hour timeline.
So the timelines have been flexible, and it does appear that the issue of custody of the hostages has been resolved. We will know when the hostages come out, exactly what kind of condition they're in. There is an expectation that there will be 20 living male hostages coming out, either all in one group or coming out all on the same day. That we don't know. The hostages are not being held together, it does not seem. So there are moves underway right now to collect the hostages, bring them to a point where they can be handed over to the Israelis. We've spoken to hostages just over the last several days who were freed, and they talked about how they were held deep in tunnels, sometimes 100 feet underground, with another hostage or two. And each time there has been a hostage release, the Red Cross has been involved. It has usually taken Hamas a day or two to get them into a safe collection location. Israel stops its attacks and the handovers take place, and then the hostages are immediately flown to Israel, greeted by soldiers to receive medical training, and they're greeted by usually one or two family members, intimate family members, to receive them. We don't know exactly when this is going to play out, but the hostage families and all of their advocates stress that it needs to happen quickly, because after 2 years, they are malnourished, they are in terrible condition, and each day matters.
Talking about the hostages there, then we also know 1,200 Israelis killed in the initial terror attack 2 years ago. By some estimates, 67,000 people of Gaza killed in this war. Gaza, as you've been reporting, Richard, and our team there, nearly wiped off the map completely over these 2 years. Starvation, reports of starvation in Gaza as well. Talk to us about the conditions right now there.
So the conditions in Gaza are horrific. It looks like a moonscape. Most of the population has been driven from their homes. People have been moving from place to place, living in tents. There are parts of Gaza that have officially been declared famine areas. According to local medical officials, more than 67,000 people have been killed by Israeli strikes over the last 2 years. Half of them, those officials say, women and children. And prominent medical officials say the death toll is likely higher than that, and that more bodies will be found once construction crews are able to get in.
It's an important point. Okay, Richard, stand by for us. I want to go to the White House right now. NBC senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us live. Gabe, what do we know? The president is hinting he may go to the region, he may go to Egypt or somewhere, possibly Israel, this week or this weekend?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. Look, it was a dramatic day of the White House, as you were discussing with Richard. The president, more than an hour into his event this afternoon, was interrupted by Secretary Rubio and President Trump also saying that he planned to go to the Middle East some point this weekend, leaving perhaps as early as Saturday and perhaps getting there Sunday. Unclear exactly where, but he did suggest that Egypt was a possibility. Now, Tom, this is extremely important for the White House. They have been looking forward to this day for quite some time. And you mentioned in that note that you were speaking with Richard, where Secretary Rubio passed him, it was very important for President Trump to announce this deal first, and he wanted to have it confirmed so that he could post it on social media. Within the past few moments, we have gotten a statement from the Qataris, which acted as mediators here, confirming the deal and saying that the details will be announced soon. Now, Tom, this comes just days after President Trump hosted Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu here at the White House, where they unveiled that 20-point plan. Again, this agreement, according to the president, is just the first phase of this deal. So we're going to be pressing White House officials to see exactly what the details are here, and over the next couple of days, when the president will exactly make his way to the Middle East, Tom.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez for us, reporting on these breaking developments. Again, President Trump's peace plan for Gaza, for Israel, it seems has been accepted. The president announcing this on Truth Social, saying both Israel and the Palestinians have, including Hamas, have come to an agreement on the initial phase of this peace plan, that all of the hostages inside Gaza will be released. Again, the timing of all this is very, very fluid. We're going to continue to cover this both live in Israel and also, of course, from the White House. That concludes this NBC News special report right now. You know we're going to have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now, and online at NBCnews.com with up-to-the-minute updates throughout the night. I'm Tom Yamas reporting live from New York City tonight. We thank you so much for watching.
With that, folks, we'll take over here on Live Impact News. Once again, we'll welcome you here to our stream. I'm Vanessa Rufus. You heard the big news there with that NBC News special report that there could be some major headway in attempts to bring peace to Gaza after 2 years of fighting. Now, you heard reports where there was an alluding to this meeting, this roundtable that was happening with the president earlier today. We actually had that roundtable live for you here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus as it was happening. There was a moment that happened, you heard the reporter saying about an hour into this roundtable, which was unrelated. It was reportedly about Antifa and concerns that the Trump administration has with any sort of operations Antifa might be having in the country. There was a moment where Secretary of State Marco Rubio handed off this note to the president, and press cameras were able to capture that note itself and zoom in, and you can actually see on the note is written the following message. It says, "Very close. We need you to approve a Truth Social post soon so you can announce deal first." And that is essentially what brings us to this point where you have potentially this major development in international dialogue, and the post from the president there on Truth Social kind of breaking that news. We want to take you back to that moment, that interchange between the Secretary of State and the president from just a few hours ago today.
Daniel. Thank you. And by the way, we have Marco Rubio. Marco, come on up here, please. He's going to bring a little stability to this group. Come on up. Does everybody know Marco Rubio? Is there anybody that doesn't? Some of the reporters don't. That's why they shouldn't be reporters.
Which job is he here for today,
Come
sir?
on up here, Marco. Anything we should know about the Middle East?
That's what we're hoping to talk to you about here, Mr. President. Stay with you.
He's doing a good job. He was born for this job, I can tell you. Daniel, please.
President, thank you very much. I have two questions for you, if that's okay. Seamus talked a little bit about the money aspect of this. Do you believe if you go after where the money is coming from with Antifa, in regards to Antifa, do you believe that would be similar to cutting the head off the snake, so to speak? And I have
It would help. I don't know that it would be totally complete, but it would certainly, you'd knock out 75%, 80%, 85%. These people, a lot of them don't believe it. You know, when they, I watch them, I say, I can almost tell a pro they're like professionals. That's all they do. And they get paid by somebody. I think it would knock out a lot of it. Yeah, not all of it maybe, but a lot of it.
And then a follow-up to that is a lot of the people who we've listened to over the last hour, they've emphasized that Antifa, it's not necessarily this big organized thing. It's a bit ambiguous. It's deorganized. I think that's one of the words that Andy used. What is the challenges of going after a group that makes it intentionally difficult to go after and find? That could be for you, the Attorney General, anyone up there.
Well, they're smart people, and they deceive. A lot of them are crooked people. A lot of them have been staying out of trouble their whole lives, and they've been bad from the day they were born, frankly. But these are sick people. Pam, go ahead, please.
Well, they're smart, but they're not smart enough. Oh, my microphone's broken. They're smart, but they're not smart enough. They have been covered by these liberal cities for so many years, and that's why we're all working with Treasury, with all these different departments, to find the criminal conspiracy.
Okay. I'm just giving. Yeah, I was just given a note by the Secretary of State saying that we're very close to a deal in the Middle East, and they're going to need me pretty quickly, so I will take a couple of more questions. Please.
Thank you, sir. I also have two questions for you, if I may. Have you given any more thought to possibly suspending habeas corpus to not only deal with these insurrectionists across the nation, but also to continue rapidly deporting illegal aliens?
Yeah, it's suspending who?
Habeas corpus. So.
Oh, I don't know. I'd rather leave that to Christie. What do you think?
No, sir, I haven't been a part of any discussions on that.
All right, go ahead.
In the ceasefire.
This is CNN speaking, by the way. So,
are you personally
this is one of the worst reporters that you'll ever see. I don't even want to take a question. It's a waste of time. Go ahead.
Mr. President, how will you decide which workers get back pay and which workers do not?
Well, we're going to see. Most of them are going to get back pay, and we're going to try and make sure of that. But some of them are being hurt very badly by the Democrats, and they therefore won't qualify. In the back, please.
It's been actually very compelling proof that Antifa did infiltrate on January 6th, dressed up like Trump supporters and incited violence. Is that something that you would want the new J6 committee at Congress to look into?
Well, I've heard that. They dress up like, they're fresh out of MAGA, but they have nothing to do with MAGA. And they make trouble and they try and blame it. And yeah, we know some of that, and we will be acting on some of that. We've seen it. So I think You could stay a little longer, but the problem is, although you have some very honest journalists in here, you also have some largely dishonest journalists like MSDNC and CNN. I think they're very dishonest, unbelievably, like a waste of time even talking to them. But I have to go now to try and solve some problems in the Middle East, although I'm very well represented by our Secretary of State. He could probably do an even better job than me. Who knows? We don't want to take any chances, so we're going to go and do that. If you'd like, Pam, would you like to stay for another 5 minutes, 10 minutes while we have all these great people? And I'll let Pam and Christy take over and get some good points out. I just want to thank the people around the table in particular. You've been amazing. You've been brave. You're real patriots. You're real patriots. And at some point, we're going to have to look into, at least in certain cases, rewarding you with some very important medals and honors, okay, as we have done and will be doing with Charlie Kirk. Charlie is getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is our highest award outside of the Congressional Medal of Honor, and I think they're sort of even. One's civilian and one's military, but unfortunately the civilian sometimes is military also because of what we have to go through on the streets of this country. I can only tell you this: we have a great nation. We have a nation that's right now the hottest in the entire world. We're the hottest nation in the world, despite all of the things we've been saying today, but that's going to make your job easier because nobody's doing better than we are financially. We've never done better. We've had, I think, 58 stock market increases since I've been top, meaning record increases. We have never seen anything like it, and we're going to keep it going. That makes it a little bit easier for what we're doing. I guess maybe it also makes some people crazy because they don't want to see us do well. But we're the hottest nation anywhere in the world, and we were a dead nation 1 year ago. I say it all the time. We were a dead nation. Now we're the hottest nation in the world, and that's said to by every leader. One of the reasons that we have every country already signed up or just about to sign, every country in the world on this whole mess we have going over with Hamas and the Middle East and all of the things you see, is they respect our nation. A year ago, you wouldn't have been able to get it. You certainly couldn't have gotten it with Biden. He didn't know where the hell he was. But a year ago, you wouldn't have been able to have a situation like this. So I just want to thank the people around this table, and certainly the officials around the table, because they've been incredible. They've been brave. And I watched yesterday, Pam, and I watched a little bit. I thought it was so good. I rounded up, and I watched it late in the evening because I thought you were fantastic yesterday. You really, look, we had some wonderful senators, some great politicians asking you very fair questions, and you had some real slime balls. But I thought you were amazing, so thank you very much. And Christy, thanks for the great job. Cash, thanks for the great job. Always my man back down there. He's the silent type, but he's a hell of a lawyer. Thank you all. We're going to get peace in the Middle East. That's what we want to do. Thank you very much, everybody.
What specifically makes you so hopeful, Mr. President?
Folks, once again, you were listening into the moments from several hours ago today where the president was holding this roundtable with several folks from his cabinet and other folks who were invited to this roundtable unrelated to any sort of dialogue in the Middle East. It pertained to Antifa, as we mentioned, prefaced, going into this clip. But you saw the moments where Secretary of State Marco Rubio passed that note to the president, essentially asking him to approve a Truth Social post, referencing the fact that they were very close to a deal regarding peace in Gaza as this ongoing war now stretching to 2 years. And then, of course, the breaking news of the evening here, the president posting on Truth Social that first phase of the Gaza peace plan has been approved by both parties, Israel and Hamas, and that he has intentions to travel to the Middle East region sometime this week or this weekend, although not giving a lot of details about that specific visit. Essentially, though, we're seeing the wheels in motion to, at the very least, up front here, release some of the hostages Gaza is, or Hamas is holding, and this is 20 people who remain living. So much more to come on this topic, of course, throughout the evening here on Live Impact and in the coming days. Meantime, we want to bring it back home, more domestic related matters, because we talk a lot about the economy lately. Folks are really in tune to a lot of the numbers that have been coming out. And of course, there are the traditional economic indicators. They are revealing that there's an economy that is starting to slow down here. But there are other signs, and they're kind of, I guess, non-traditional and or, kind of unexpected ways that slowing economy is showing up in folks' habits. So here to talk about that some more, we have Ivan Rodriguez joining us once again on Live Impact. It's good to see you again, Ivan. Thank you for joining us. What are you watching right now?
Well, Vanessa, some indicators say the U.S. economy is slowing. Recent data shows it's still growing. Consumer spending remains strong, and the unemployment rate isn't setting off alarm bells. But changes in how people and businesses spend and invest their money could be previews for what's to come. By traditional measures, the U.S. economy, even with its sticky inflation and softening labor market, is stable.
They're not great. They could definitely be better. They could definitely be worse.
Despite the sustained pressure of high prices shaking consumer confidence, Americans are also still spending. But there is a widening spending gap between high and low income consumers, and signs revealing how people are spending their money may be changing.
We've delayed car purchases some. Appliances, electronics, we've slowed down on that. Travel, we've slowed down on that.
Virginia Tech economics professor Jadrian Wooten points to less obvious indicators of economic discomfort, like cardboard box manufacturing, which is down 9% in 2025 amid U.S. factory closures and cutbacks.
If cardboard box manufacturers were not making as many boxes, that meant that stores were not ordering as many boxes because they didn't anticipate selling as many products in the future.
This week, the price of gold surged past $4,000 per ounce, another possible red flag for the state of affairs.
People are trying to invest money in something that they feel is going to be really stable. And a lot of people do run to gold whenever the markets are a little bit uncertain.
Wooten says even though many are worried about what lies ahead, the health of the U.S. economy relies on its consumers.
If a lot of people think a recession is coming, they're going to pull back on spending. And one of the problems with that is when they pull back on spending, that's actually what ends up causing the recession to happen.
Another non-scientific indicator experts point to is movie ticket sales. Since the Great Depression, people have sought escape through the movies as an affordable way to get entertainment. Sometimes when box office sales go up, it's a sign the economy is headed down. But some experts say it could also be a sign that Hollywood is putting out movies people really want to see. Vanessa?
Really interesting stuff. I mean, we talked about travel, and you kind of mentioned that in your piece and what we're seeing with travel lately. We know after the pandemic, there was a lot of what was called revenge spending, including on travel and experiences and fun things, as folks were able to actually get out of their homes and do more. What are we seeing specifically on the travel front and how folks are spending their money when it comes to that?
Well, people are beginning to change on the type of travel. Since April, spending at campsites has spiked and was up 15% year over year in August, according to Bank of America card data. B of A analysts actually wrote last week that consumers may be trading airfare for fire pits because of affordability.
Wow. Very interesting. Ivan Rodriguez, thank you so much for your time. And of course, I know we'll be watching this topic closely going in the coming weeks. So thanks for spending some time giving us some insights. All right, folks, we're going to turn now to a quick break. We'll be back in 2 minutes with all of your breaking headlines, live feeds that are coming on here in our Live Impact News studio. Once again, 2 minutes, and we'll see you on the other side. Welcome back, everyone, here to Live Impact News. As we mentioned just a few moments ago, we've got a busy evening ahead of us. Of course, we're keeping an eye on the very latest with that breaking news regarding potential headway with the peace talks for Gaza. Israel and Hamas signing off on that first phase, reportedly, of that peace deal, which would entail the release of the live hostages that Hamas is holding, 20 live men, as we're told. We're going to continue, of course, to follow that throughout the evening. We've got a live feed that just popped up here into our Live Impact newsroom showing the scale of protests that are underway in the city of Chicago as we speak. So we know Chicago's been in the headlines lately regarding the push by the Trump administration to get National Guard troops onto the streets of Chicago. There have been clashes between protesters and federal agents over ICE operations. They escalated over the weekend and really have just been capping off here the weeks of tension that we've been seeing in the city. And now it is, of course, you can see bringing folks out to the street once again tonight. We've got, of course, kind of a head-to-head that's going with the president and the mayor, Mayor Brandon Johnson, as well as the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker. In fact, today, the president said that the mayor and the governor, should be in jail for failing to protect federal immigration officers. National Guard, we should remind you, are actually positioned a few miles outside of Chicago, and around 200 Texas National Guard members were on the U.S. Army Reserve Center in Elwood, which is 55 miles southwest of the city. The Trump administration wants to deploy them at those ICE facilities and at the protest sites across the city. So there you can see live look at the crowd from the sky. Dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of people, from what we can gather just from this angle, holding signs. You see one of them, rather large print, the one that you can actually read from this way high up, "No Trump, no troops." Another sign saying "Fight for immigrants and workers' rights." So this is just one of the scenes we're seeing here in cities across the nation as we've been talking about these pushes to bring National Guard. Chicago, not the only one. Of course, we've been talking about the ongoing dialogue happening in Portland, Oregon. We actually brought you that dialogue at length here on Live Impact News yesterday. So more on that topic to come. We wanted to set the table, though, for the next couple of minutes here on Live Impact. We will be bringing it back closer to home here to the Carolinas. We've been talking a lot about safety and public transit in the city of Charlotte. Our Tradisha Woodard is going to be working on a story for us tonight at 11, so she'll join us in just a few moments to preview that piece and what we're seeing at this very hour as it comes to that conversation over keeping folks safe on public transit. With that, though, we shall take another quick break here. 2 minutes is the time, so we'll see you on the other side. Thanks for sticking with us here on Live Impact News. right, thanks so much for sticking with us here on Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus. We do want to dive into the transportation dialogue happening in the city of Charlotte right now. Obviously a big topic, not just from the transportation element and the fact that we've got this 1 cent sales tax that's coming up for voters to decide in November. We also have the separate discussion as well about public safety. We're actually kind of seeing the topics getting merged now. But nevertheless, our Tradisha Woodard is covering a big safety plan in a follow-up discussion regarding safety, bus stops, public transit, and you're working on this piece tonight at 11. Can you tell us about what went down today?
Yeah, so obviously a lot of eyes on public transportation, accessibility. That's been some growing concerns, especially given the light of everything that's happened. So tonight they basically just kind of tackled bus stop safety, specifically a lot of those aged amenities. I know they said one of the biggest concerns was lighting. A lot of bus drivers end up passing people who've been waiting for a while at these bus stops because they can't see. So they talked about a lot of the enhancements they've been working on over the years, and some of those enhancements that folks are going to see over the next couple months, as soon as fall. And we're in fall now, so they're moving pretty quickly with a lot of those enhancements.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you brought that up, the bus stops, because I pass quite a few, on my drive around the city, whether I'm going to work or coming home or going elsewhere. And I noticed that at some of the stops, I'm starting to see brand new benches that look like they're actually installed by, I want to say, like Good Samaritans or just folks who are part of the city, but maybe recognizing that there are bus stops where there are actually no places for folks to sit, and they've made their own. They look like wooden benches, and it actually, has like a little sign on them that's, I can't remember what it says, but it's like benches for something. But I think it just points to maybe a need that the city might have for folks who use this element of transit.
It definitely points to a need. They're supposed to be rolling out at least 2,000 different amenity upgrades within the next year. And they said, it's a process. People want things done. They want it done now, but there is a process, and they talked about the process they're having to go through to get these amenities rolled out as soon as possible, but also making sure they hunker down on those safety issues first, such as lighting. So I know one of the things they talked about was bringing in solar lights that are automatic, and it stays on for 5 minutes, or you can just literally walk past the light so that bus drivers can see you, because sometimes the street lights just aren't enough. But making sure folks not only have access from point A to point B, but also feel safe while doing so.
Now, we know we're talking specifically about bus stops here. Obviously, whenever we talk about safety in public transit, there's always that looming headline that, folks cannot shake, and understandably so. It was just such a horrific crime, but the stabbing of Irina Zarutska on the light rail. Did that come at all up during the talks today, or was this purely just focused on bus stops, and it seemed to kind of steer clear of that?
Yeah. So they did steer clear of that discussion today, but you can definitely feel the tensions still from this situation when you talk about public safety and transit altogether. They didn't necessarily hunker down on that at all today, but they talked about ways they can improve, ways they can move forward, issues they can tackle before they even become issues, just trying to iron out as many kinks as possible in general when it comes to transit in light of the situation with Zarutska.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned you'll be working on a piece for us coming up at 11 here on WCNC+. Any previews on folks we'll be hearing from, information that will be shared?
Yeah, so you're going to be hearing from the CATS team members. They're going to be talking a little bit about some of those updates that they've made over the years, where they are now, what they're planning on doing next, talking a little bit about some safety issues, ways they're working around it, and also possibly hearing from some city leaders that also had questions about people who commute on the buses, ways they can get their questions answered, if they have any problems or if they have any safety issues, ways they can get some answers to those questions to bring some relief for those who are waiting at those stops for long periods of time.
All right. Well, looking forward to seeing your piece. Thank you for joining us here on Live Impact, Tradisha. We'll see you later.
Absolutely.
All right. And folks, actually, we have a little bit of that meeting today queued up for you if you'd like to see kind of an extended look at how the conversation went. And of course, kind of giving you a sample of what you'll see later tonight with Tradisha's reporting. So let's take you now to that meeting from earlier today.
We'll open it up with Brent Cagle, interim CEO, to introduce the safety and security update.
Yes, thank you, members of PTAC and Ms. Calderhead. We're happy to be here this afternoon with you. I will turn it over directly to Eric Osnes. Eric is going to speak about the Agency Safety Plan, or ASP. This is a required document that CATS has. We work together with NCDOT SSO each year on this. And so this document, it is a requirement, and it is updated annually. So updates and amendments to the ASP are normal and expected. This will be version 5, and I believe this will be its 5th year in existence. So again, this is a routine part of the process as we work together with NCDOT. With that, I'll give it over to Mr. Osnes.
Thank you, sir. So just to give a briefing on the ASP, as Mr. Cagle has described, this is a requirement of the FTA. It's a process that we work with the SSOA, and we work together to make sure that this plan meets the requirements of the SSOA's operating procedure. I'd like to give a little briefing, a little background as to what this document is all about, because it is a little different than a typical compliance plan. The ASP is about having a framework. It's our playbook, I'd like to say. It's our playbook that enables us as an organization to integrate the function of safety within the business process throughout the organization. It's a little bit, like I said, it's a little bit different than a typical compliance-based document where we may be developing something that the regulatory agencies are asking us to comply with, and we're providing resources to comply with that document. It's different. This document is different because it outlines the elements necessary to integrate the function of safety, as I said, to all of the business processes. If you ever worked with ISO, if you ever worked with ANSI standards, if you ever dealt with Deming principles, it describes a plan, do, check, act framework. If you break it down into some key component elements, you're looking at management accountability, you're looking at employee participation, how do we evaluate ourselves, how do we evaluate risk, how do we implement all this, and how do we actually come back and review what we have implemented to determine whether or not it's meeting a desired effect. So the FTA took these principles and turned it into a standard, and the standard by which we go by is in essence this particular plan is an output of those standards. So if you go to the first slide, it talks about the requirement under 673. Again, 673 talks about these critical elements that make up the plan that refer to those base principles I spoke about earlier. So if you go to the next slide, Emily, the way the plan is described, if you look through the table of contents, we're looking at management policy. That's in essence management accountability. How does Brent and how are we accountable, Mr. Cagle, I should say, sorry for being so informal. Mr. Cagle and how are we accountable for the dissemination of these principles throughout the organization? Risk management, if you look into the table of contents, again, you'll see the framework by which we determine risk. How do we look at our operations? How do we break down our operations into component parts? How do we determine high hazard operations? And how do we define formally what those operations are? Safety assurance, we'll be talking about activities related to, sorry, Emily, can you go to the next slide? Safety assurance will be talking about how employees participate through training. How do we evaluate through inspections? How do we document? How do we develop committees so that we have employee participation? And then the promotion piece of it. How does all of this get communicated not only to our employees, but to our community? Ridership, how do we promote the functions of safety within our ridership? So every year, we work with our SOA partnerships to make sure all of these critical elements are represented and that their operating procedures are also represented into these four critical elements, again, which goes back to the FTA, which defines how this particular policy should be represented. Next slide. So if we're looking at the changes that have occurred and how it's reflected in this document, I would say that the largest change, the most represented change, has to do with roadway worker protection. Last year, there was a standard that was passed by the FTA. The FTA said by the end of this year, we need to implement changes the way on how we protect road workers on the track. It's in essence giving us guidelines. It's a compliance document that we need to abide by, and it tells us how we are going to provide zones and levels of protection on our roadway so that workers that are on the track, who are in the right-of-way, are protected from oncoming trains. So that's really the biggest change that the document represents. There are obviously other changes in there, and you can look at those changes at your leisure, but primarily that's really what's reflected for this particular version is the roadway protection guidelines. I think that's really what I wanted to say about the latest update with the ASP. Next slide, Emily. If there are any changes, if there are any questions. Oh, one more comment, sorry. For future state 2025, being a relative new person to the organization, my goal for 2025 is to make sure that this plan is being disseminated not only within the rail, but on the bus side of the house. We need to make sure that we're looking at our world from one set of principles, and that that set of principles is equitably disseminated both in the rail and on the bus side of the house. So my goal for 225 is 226 is to make sure that what we're saying within this document is truly represented throughout the organization. And that's what I have. So unless there's any
The
questions.
last thing I'll point out to everyone is we work extensively with the North Carolina DOT SSO. That is our state safety office. They provide safety oversight, particularly to rail. So we work extensively with the SSO to develop this document to ensure that it is meeting all FTA standards and following guidelines. The draft ASP that was emailed out has been approved conditionally by the SSO, and our next step with this document will be seeking approval of the ASP Revision 5 before the MTC on October 22nd.
Take that a little down, Michael. This seems to be the plan for internal safety for CAT's employees, or does this extend out to customers?
It extends out to customer, and it extends out to contractor as well. So, and it also extends to design. So if you really look at it from the perspective of how comprehensive this document is, it takes into all aspects of our operation. So not only what's occurring in-house with employees, it speaks to what's happening with our customer base. It speaks to how we certify projects in design through commissioning and testing, and it talks about construction-based activities as well. So I would say it's a fairly comprehensive overview. And again, it's about implementing that framework that I was trying to convey before.
So one clarification too on this, and this isn't 100%, but I want to make sure. So, you know, in all of our daily lives, we sort of talk about safety and security almost interchangeably. The ASP is really, so when we talk about safety and the agency safety plan, that is not the same as a conversation about security, right? So when you look at the ASP, it's talking about how do we operate safely? How do passengers or customers or the general public interact with transit safely? And so that is one thing that sort of understanding that context, that when we're talking about safety, that there is a clear distinction between safety in this context and security associated with the system.
I think that answers my follow-up question, which was, were there any revisions to this plan based on the tragedy that occurred, right, to this document? So I think I see how you're separating the two, but I don't know if there were any revisions in this part of that accounted for that.
So one thing that we could talk about for next year's revisions is maybe some of the lessons learned and what strategies we are incorporating that may fit into the objective of this document. The document extensively talks about risk analysis, and what we have done with respect to risk assessment in relation to the lessons learned of this tragic event and the strategies that will and about to be implemented as a result. There may be a fit for this in this document as well, to describe some of those strategies. And this is something, as Mr. Cagle talked about, where we're working with our SSOA counterparts very closely on developing this document, and they may want us to reflect some of that.
As part of our FTA review, so we're sort of in this odd spot timing-wise where we need to update the ASP associated with the known changes, especially the RWP. And generally, you update the ASP every year based on things that change with the FTA or guidance. We may, but you don't. You can update it as often as needed. And so we may be in a position where this gets approved, and then, as Mr. Osnes said, we continue to work with the FTA in light of August 22nd, and there could be a revision sooner than 1 year down the road.
Nichelle Dunlap Thompson, Mecklenburg County. Thank you so much for this presentation. My question is, do we have, and I know this is maybe premature, but are there measurable benchmarks that we will be able to determine the success of this plan, and will that be shared? And then my second question is, with these implementations, I know that you said that it is relevant to customer, and for me, of course, I'm talking about community, but because it was not or is not lined out in here specifically, does that mean that that won't be measured, or that'll be case-by-case implementation as needed? I'm just trying to get an understanding on how we're able to track the success of this as well as inclusion.
So I'll do my best to try to address that question, and it's a good question. So the plan itself under the SSOA requirements is that we audit every aspect of the plan, and that schedule for auditing is within a 3-year period. So every section of the plan gets audited to make a determination on whether there's a level of success in relation to the requirements of that section. We are currently finishing the 3-year audit cycle. I believe that we are on our last section of what we agreed to audit with our SSOA counterparts. And as of this time, we have been able to provide data that indicates that the plan is being executed in the manner in which it was designed. There also are, if you get into the plan, there are 14 points, there are 14 metrics that are embedded into the document, and that there are goals associated with those metrics within the document. It's based on NTD data. That's a requirement that we submit on a monthly basis to our FTA counterparts. So I would suggest, and if I answered your question correctly, between the internal audit requirements as well as the 14-point metric requirements that are embedded into the plan, it gives us a good indication on whether it's providing for the desired effect.
All right, once again, folks, a little bit of that CATS meeting, so the transit leaders in Charlotte discussing safety, and of course our Tradisha Woodard coming up at 11 o'clock with a piece about specifically bus stops and different ways that city leaders are hoping to improve, not just safety, but also sounds like comfort as well for folks who use those buses. With that, we're going to take a quick break. 2 minutes, we'll be back. Wanted to mention when we return, we're going to have the very latest on impacts from the government shutdown, specifically as it pertains to airport operations. Obviously a big topic this entire week. We continue to see issues with staffing. We'll tell you where in 2. Vanessa Rufus here alongside producer James Brierton. We promised an update on airport operations, and we've been checking in with these periodically over the past several days as the government shutdown is now in its 8th day, and we continue to see issues with air traffic control staffing, and that is really having a ripple effect on various airports, including the latest one in D.C., right, James?
Yeah, it's deja vu all over again, Vanessa. So the latest airport to add to the list of airports who are having flight delay problems due to a lack of air traffic controllers is DCA Airport. That's the Reagan Airport there just outside of Washington, D.C. I believe we have a live shot that shows you the status of that airport right now. And the FAA is saying that Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport is delayed on average by about 30 minutes. They consider that a ground delay due to staffing. Also looking into FAA data at this hour, Vanessa, we can see that there are not only problems at some of the airports, but also in some of the regional control facilities. Both Philadelphia and the greater D.C. area are listing tonight that they have throttled staffing, which is also what we saw last night starting to cause problems at certain airports, because when they are short on staffing either at the airport tower or at those regional facilities, they oftentimes will deploy a strategy where they throttle and slow down the number of aircraft moving through the system so that the controllers don't get overworked, Vanessa.
Yeah, and it's been tough, I feel like, to kind of predict or tell folks where the issues are going to be, because it really is, I don't want to say human-based, but it's at its heart, it's staffing, and you don't know who's going to be calling out essentially, and how many folks are going to be left. And we pointed this out, but really interesting to note, one of the first, whiffs of, concern, I guess I'll say, was several days ago where we had Hollywood Burbank. They had nobody, absolutely nobody in the air traffic control tower for several hours starting around 8 o'clock Eastern time. So during Live Impact News, and that was something we brought folks.
Yeah, and that then puts a strain on other controllers who might try to remotely monitor that airport, which is one of the tools that's in the tool set. We also not only have the problem of limited staffing that is being amplified by this government shutdown, but we have just the normal run-of-the-mill problems that also pop up. We have a cold front moving through the East Coast that is bringing weather to certain parts of the country, thus creating some delays. One of those airports that is reporting both a weather problem and just a miscellaneous equipment problem is New York's LaGuardia Airport, which right now is seeing a ground stop due to winds. That goes until 8:30 tonight. And even with that in mind, they still are being plagued by some sort of mysterious FAA equipment problem. That's all it says. And that is causing delays of about 45 minutes.
Yeah. And as that's happening, we're seeing other airports where we had the issues earlier in the week seemingly back to normal. Like, for example, I believe it was Nashville we were following last night. That appears to have returned to normal as far as the operations are concerned. That's fallen off the FAA list of concern, if you will. So once again, kind of just rolling with it, riding the wave here and seeing what pops up, hour by hour on this website is kind of how we've been tracking things.
That's right.
All right. Coming up now on a good time to take a break, because we're approaching top of the hour, James. So thank you so much for your help with that reporting. Folks, we'll be back in 2 minutes with the very latest on the escaped inmate, the final inmate who remained at large from that New Orleans facility. This was a jailbreak from back in May. They finally captured that 10th inmate. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus. We continue to watch the feeds around the Carolinas and around the nation and the world, following a big headline out of Gaza. Of course, we'll get to that in a second. We've got some headlines we're seeing related to the ICE protest front and the attempts to deploy National Guard. In fact, live aerials coming to us right now from Chicago, where we continue to see protesters there in the street protesting ICE operations. And this is really kind of bringing to a head here weeks and weeks of protests where we've been seeing folks from the community coming to the streets and sharing their concerns they see with the ICE operations and detainments that are underway. Important to note, of course, this week, really starting to see that head-to-head with the president and the mayor of Chicago, as well as the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, as there is pushback we're seeing on attempts to deploy National Guard in response to protests here, and also over President Trump's concerns that there could be clashes between federal immigration officers and these protesters. And he said here, that Pritzker and the mayor, Brandon Johnson, should in fact be in jail, he says, for failing to protect federal immigration officers. We're actually going to have more on that a little bit later tonight if we can get to that. But we'll continue to keep an eye on this shot. You can just see just how many folks, and it's hard to tell because we were seeing a different angle. It almost looks like there are more people that have taken to the streets since we last checked this shot in the last hour. With that, we do want to turn to a live look from Gaza, where that is the big international headline at this hour. We had for you the top of last hour, that big breaking news as President Trump had announced on Truth Social that the first phase of this Gaza deal, the attempts to bring peace to Gaza after 2 years of fighting, appears to be signed off by both parties, so Israel and Hamas. And this would essentially entail the release of all the hostages, the 20 people who are living and expecting to be released. We are hearing, according to reports, including to CNN, who is hearing from officials that these hostages could be released as early as this weekend. In fact, the president saying that he has plans to go to the Middle East region this weekend, and there are more discussions that need to happen, but seemingly some positive headway in attempts to get this deal done. So more on that to come tonight and, of course, in the days and weeks to come here on Live Impact News. Meantime, we wanted to get to the very latest with a headline we are following out of New Orleans and Atlanta. And I say this because we remember back in May, we covered for you actually in great length that jailbreak that happened, 10 inmates escaping the New Orleans jail, and ended up being captured over the course of several weeks. Well, about 5 months later, today, authorities announced that in Atlanta, they had finally apprehended that final suspect, that 10th person. And now we're hearing tonight from authorities in New Orleans, the very latest on how that apprehension took place, how they were able to track him down, and what the situation is now going forward. So let's listen to this. This is just from a few moments ago tonight.
Investigations that we were talking about before that, so just make sure everybody understands where we're at. Okay. You don't need a white balance anymore? Good.
All right, and folks, we'll just remind you that this is the raw, unedited feed, so you're going to see probably some mic checks. They do a lot of visual checks before press conferences happen, but we'll tell you this to kind of lead in. This inmate at large, who they finally captured, Derek Groves, was captured in southwest Atlanta earlier today. Multiple agencies taking part, including Atlanta Police, sounds like Clayton County officials, and U.S. Marshals. Now, Groves was actually awaiting a life sentence at the time of the jailbreak. There was actually 2 different convictions, but 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of separate manslaughter convictions. And this was a person they were really trying to get back behind bars because protective orders were actually in place for people who were related to Mr. Groves' case. Got the officials now speaking, so we're going to go back to that feed once again from just a few moments this evening.
Sheriff, move a little more. Darlene, you come in a little. Okay. Marshals, we'll get y'all on the other side. Thank y'all. Okay, good evening. I'm Colonel Robert Hodges, Superintendent of Louisiana State Police. Almost 5 months ago, most of us in this same room met to discuss 10 inmates who escaped from the Orleans Parish Justice Center. We all had one focus: to capture the 10 escapees. Collectively, federal, state, and local law enforcement worked together seamlessly to locate and arrest these fugitives. Together, we leveraged investigative tools, technology, and good old-fashioned police work. Although many weeks have gone by, our 10th fugitive, Groves, remained at large. Law enforcement never lost sight during the investigation and our responsibility to bring a violent criminal back to prison. In early October 2025, task force personnel learned that Derek Groves was likely in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Through information gathered via multiple search warrants and other investigative means, detectives obtained digital evidence that Derek Groves was at a residence in Atlanta. Today, with the assistance of numerous law enforcement agencies, including the Atlanta Police Department and the U.S. Marshal Service, search warrants were executed at a residence in southwest Atlanta where Derek Groves was ultimately taken into custody. I want to personally thank the FBI, ATF, HSI, DEA, the U.S. Marshal Service, the Secret Service, the Attorney General's Office, State Probation and Parole, our LSP troopers and investigators, the New Orleans Police Department, the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office, the St. Bernard Parish Sheriff's Office, the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office, and the Crime Stoppers of Greater New Orleans for their unwavering support of public safety. Together, we are stronger, and today marks the culmination of nearly 5 months of investigative work. As you look to the screen, to my right, your left, you will see the 10 escapees from the Orleans Parish Justice Center. All have been returned to correctional facilities where they no longer pose a threat to the residents and visitors of Louisiana. Next, you'll hear from our State Attorney General, Liz Murrow.
Thank you, Colonel. Today is a good day. Today, we were able to get the final escapee put back in jail to await further proceedings, and I'll walk you through what that's going to look like in just a minute. He has already been charged with 1 count of simple escape on June 30th, along with the other 9 defendants. He will be arraigned on those charges as soon as we get him back from Georgia. He will be taken to Angola, where we have continued to keep all of the other escapees at this time. Tomorrow, he'll see a magistrate judge in Georgia, where he will be able to waive extradition if he chooses to do so. If he doesn't choose to do so, then we will initiate extradition proceedings and eventually remove him back here to Louisiana, and the proceedings will continue. I think that there's some other folks here who could talk a little bit about some of the things that we located at the house at the time that he was arrested, taken back into custody. We do expect to examine whether we can upgrade the charges to aggravated escape in light of the material that they found, which included weapons and drugs. I want to walk you through just real quickly what his criminal history was. In 2019, he was convicted, he pled guilty on a DEA case involving guns and drugs. He was convicted in October 2024 on a 2018 double murder on Mardi Gras Day. That case involved 2 charges of second-degree murder and 2 charges of attempted second-degree murder. Jason Williams' office, I believe, handled all of that, all of those charges at the time. I think virtually the next day, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter for a different case. So he was awaiting sentencing for those matters, and he was scheduled for sentencing in December of 2024 when the judge at the time recused herself, and that triggered a number of proceedings to replace the judge in the case. For reasons that are still unclear, he still had not been sentenced up until May when he escaped. But I think the upshot of that is simply to remind you that this was a very dangerous individual. He is going to face jail time for a very, very long time, possibly, certainly life on the second-degree murders. Those he should have been sentenced to life in prison for, because that's the mandatory jail time for that. So he will also get additional time. We expect he'll be prosecuted in Georgia and possibly by the feds. So he's got a lot of trouble and a lot of things to answer to both the state of Louisiana and the state of Georgia. And I'd also point out that this has been extraordinarily taxing. You see all the law enforcement agencies who are up here who have been working diligently to try and get him back into custody. It's been expensive. It has been very scary for a lot of people, for staff at the DA's office, for victims and witnesses who might have been involved in some of these cases that implicated Derek Groves. So, you know, it's a very unsettling thing to have somebody out like this and not know where he is and when we're going to have him back in custody. So today is a very good day.
Darlene?
I would just like to echo what everyone said. It really is a great day that this was a peaceful resolve to this situation. Crime Stoppers was very proud and honored to be a part of this task force. What we saw an outpouring of support and concern and really just wanting to help by our community throughout this entire process. Thousands of tips were received through Crime Stoppers on the individuals who escaped. On Mr. Groves directly, several hundred have been received over this period for him with information. And what I do know, they were all vetted. So I want to thank the community for stepping forward, for sending the tips and the tip that came in regarding this particular location. But I also want to say something that y'all don't normally see in the public. It's the people standing behind me, the task force members, the law enforcement agencies who are calling, believe me, I know, in the middle of the night when they got information that they wanted to know more about, working every hour for all of these months. And I'm just so impressed. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart as a nonprofit organization representing civilians. But I hope the public takes the opportunity to thank everyone standing here and their teams for the excellent job that they did. Thank you.
Chief Kirkpatrick.
All right. Thank you, Darlene. I want to share with you a little bit of a background. Last Friday, Director Reese Harper, our PIO that everybody knows over there, we had started an initiative, and we decided that on Fridays we were going to start putting out kind of like our most wanted on Fridays. And a clever name came up by Director Harper, and we call it Front Burner Friday. So last Friday, Director Harper says to me in the hallway, I think we need to put Grove's name back out in front of the community. And I said, well, great, I think so too. And he grabbed Darlene, Cassandra, and they did their Friday, Front Burner Friday, and put Grove's name out. And it was over this weekend that we did get a tip through Crime Stoppers. So, y'all, Crime Stoppers matters, but most importantly, the community is a true partner to us. So when we speak about team, that includes the community. So we want to thank you very much and appreciate it.
Yes, D.A. Williams.
On behalf of 2 prosecutors who tried this case with me, we tried it multiple times to get a conviction. On behalf of them, who worked tirelessly to get 12 out of 12 jurors to find him guilty is charged of a double homicide on Mardi Gras. On behalf of the witnesses who were brave enough to come forward, on behalf of the next of kin who still lived in the lower Ninth Ward during all those trials, I just want to say thank you to all of the law enforcement people who stayed on mission, who continued to work together. I know a lot of people in the public thought folks had given up. They thought this was over. But these men and women continued to work together, they stayed on mission, and they delivered for the people of this community. As I said, I tried this case personally. I was in that courtroom, so I was able to get to know the next of kin. And I just want you to all to understand that the children in this family who played sports in that park in the lower Ninth Ward have not been able to go out there during all of this time. Their lives have been shut down out of fear because they didn't know where this man was. And the men and women of these different agencies have given them their lives back. And that is extraordinary. And I was talking to the next of kin a few weeks ago, and she was still trembling. And so I know that today there's a lot of gratitude in that family home that was shot up on that Mardi Gras day. And I also want to just say to the public, thank you. It was your tips. You are one of the most important pieces of this puzzle because you step up when you call in, when you provide that tip, when you show up in court. That's what makes this happen. So I can't thank the public enough for doing its part and making sure that New Orleans is a safer place. And I want to thank God because the fact that someone did not get hurt during this man's time on the lam, and the fact that no law enforcement individuals were injured or hurt, that's just the grace of God. Thank you.
Sheriff Hudson.
Thank you, Colonel. I'm not going to rename all of the agencies that helped here, but they're here up here at this dais, and I'm grateful for them. That's my word for today, just grateful. Thankful for all this help we got. Grateful that they're all back in custody. We look forward to him being sentenced and moving on to prison where he belongs. But again, want to just thank all of our partners and agencies for sharing information, making sure this could happen, and we can all move forward with our lives. I know that the grass is a little greener, the sky a little bluer for everybody today. Thank you.
Okay, this concludes our press conference. I know many of you probably have questions about the fatality crash involving the LSU star, Kyron Lacey. I'll make a quick statement on that. Louisiana State Police stands by their fatality crash investigation. In the course of that investigation, that many troopers across our state are trained reconstructionists as well as crash investigators. We utilized evidence that included eyewitness reporting, several video evidence, as well as physical evidence on the scene that is normally done, whether it's measurements to determine distance between vehicles or speeds of vehicles and other factors that result in a crash. Once again, we stand by our investigation that we had forwarded over to the District Attorney's Office in Lafourche Parish, and that's where we are with regard to that case. Thank you. I'm sorry. AG Liz will answer any or make some statements regarding the Kyron Lacey case.
So my office has also been looking at those files. We've looked at the files and the investigation conducted by state police, and we've also communicated and looked at the files of the district attorney and talked to the district attorney. The upshot is this. There's no dispute that there was a green Charger that was driving at a very high rate of speed, passing cars in a no-passing zone at somewhere around 80 miles an hour in a 40-mile-an-hour zone, and that triggered the remainder of the events. So this case is not, it's not as simple as anybody being able to come out and say that Kyron Lacey is innocent and that he was wrongly accused. The police did their job. They investigated the case. They took the statements of multiple witnesses at the scene. I think you can see that from the video. They all said there was a green Charger driving fast in the wrong lane, passing people. This all happened because of that. Now, they didn't stop there. They went back and did their due diligence, and they took those statements down. They then take their case. They made an arrest. That's what they do. They take the facts, they look at the statements that they make, and they determine what they think the appropriate charges are for the facts that they have, and they make an arrest. They then hand it over to the district attorney, and the district attorney then has to look at that file and decide whether to accept those decisions or make a different decision about what charges to accept. In this case, the district attorney also did her due diligence. She looked at everything very carefully. She had her own accident reconstruction person look at all of this. And then she made the decision to give it to a grand jury. That's because it was important to have a 12-person grand jury decide what the appropriate charges to indict him on, if any, would have been. And that's the process that we have, and it's the process that we follow. If, in fact, he had been indicted on the same charges for which he had been arrested, and he might not have been, we'll never know, because he took his own life a couple of days before that process started. So, you know, the grand jury would have made the decision about what the charges were going to be that would have followed the first part of the process. And after that, he still would have had an opportunity to take that case, if he wanted to a jury and have a jury decide whether or not he was guilty, which would have required unanimity. So that's the process that would have been followed. There's nothing that I've seen in anything in the record that indicates that anybody did anything other than their jobs by taking statements from witnesses at the scene and then going and talking to someone who was not at this, who had left the scene but left his phone number, and then putting all that information together, making a decision, handing it over to the DA's office, having the DA's office do their own work, and then decide we're going to take this to a grand jury because it was a hard case. It was not, you know, clear what charges might be indicted on. It was clear what happened. There was no real dispute over what happened. So there was never any dispute that there was a green Charger that was driving at a very high rate of speed, passing cars in the wrong lane. And if you see the video, that car, and the reason that also in time is because both vehicles are coming at each other at a high rate of speed. So you can't just look at what one car was doing and not pay attention to what the other cars were doing. They're all driving at each other on a two-lane highway. So it's simple, I think, to look at this and say that anybody really didn't, I can see no evidence whatsoever that anybody had anything other than a professional approach to this case, did their jobs the way that they should have, and put it into the process and was seeing it through the process. A grand jury would have ultimately made the decision about what to indict him on, and a jury of his peers would have made a decision, had he been indicted on these charges, they would have made a decision about whether to convict him on them. So that's just what I kind of wanted to say. I wanted to walk you through a little bit of a more careful timeline of the process, not just the video of the facts that you see, but the legal process and how it works and how it was simply cut short because he unfortunately took his own life, which no one is happy about. And then I would say you also need to remember the victim. We lost a victim in this crash who was a veteran, a Marine Corps veteran. I think he also had worked for the U.S. Customs Service for decades. You know, this gentleman lost his life because of this crash, and we shouldn't lose sight of that, too. So it is unfortunate. 2 people lost their lives that shouldn't have lost their lives. Nobody's happy about that, but I see no reason. I've seen nothing in these records that indicate that anybody was doing anything other than the best job that they could to address what was a very difficult situation.
So we'll take some questions only related to the capture of Derek Rose, starting on my left right
All right, folks, we are going to pivot away from this for just a moment, but you heard there the very latest from New Orleans authorities upon the capturing of that final escaped inmate from back in May from the New Orleans jail. One of 10 people who got loose from the jail, and now months later, they finally have all of them back in custody. We will have much more as we get more information out of New Orleans and out of Atlanta, where, of course, that apprehension actually took place today. But meantime, we've got other headlines to get to, and we'll rejoin you in 2 minutes to talk about those. All right, thanks so much for sticking with us here for Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus. We alluded to and actually showed you, and the feed's actually still up, we can still see it, but the protests that are underway in Chicago. We've been seeing a lot of pushback in various cities where the president has talked about deploying National Guard, or in the case of, for example, Los Angeles, you've actually seen the Guard deployed, where there is pushback from authorities and officials in that jurisdiction, whether it's the mayor or in some cases the governors who are pushing back. Well, we had the president today at this roundtable with some of his cabinet members, and they were discussing Antifa. They were discussing some of the situations that they say that they are seeing across the nation in various cities where they think it is concerning, and they are concerned about how leadership is handling crime, or how leadership is handling protests that have devolved into escalating interactions with federal immigration agents, for example. We want to take you now to this earlier meeting today. The president, alongside Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, ended up discussing something that the president posted about today, the fact that he could fathom perhaps arresting governors who were pushing back against him. So let's listen into that actual interaction from just a couple of hours ago today.
Earlier today, you said the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois should be jailed. Have you asked the Justice Department to look at possible charges?
No, I've seen the law, and when you have a group of people where the police call off the safety for ICE officials, I've understood that, and I've read it today in numerous journals, that that's illegal. What they did is I guess it was ICE, Kristi, right? They were under threat, right. And the police were helping beautifully, and it was fine. And then all of a sudden, a woman was on the line saying, "Everybody, move back, get out." And they were given an order by the second person in the police department, and the governor knew about it, the mayor knew about it. I understand that's a criminal offense. Do you want to comment on that, Kristi?
Yes, sir, we're seeing that kind of pattern happen with local law enforcement and state law enforcement, not just in Illinois, but also out in Oregon, too. In fact, in Portland, I was there yesterday, but some of the ICE officers were telling me that as they drove by the rioters that were saying, kill ICE agents, Molotov cocktails, melt ICE, that the Portland police were cheering them on and had their fists in the air cheering on the rioters that were threatening their lives. So in Chicago, we had a 10-car caravan trail our ICE officials and pin them down, and those ICE officials, to get out of their vehicles, a woman tried to ram them and run them over, and shots were fired to get them to safety. So it's happening on a regular basis, and any elected official that allows this to happen and gives cover to those kind of individuals who are perpetuating murder should absolutely be prosecuted, in my opinion.
All right, so there you have it. Now, coincidentally, yesterday there was an event where you had Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and you had Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker together, and they actually talked about this threat. So we want to bring you back now to that dialogue that they had. Once again, this was from yesterday. The conversation we just heard from President Trump and Kristi Noem was from today, the one that we just shared with you. So let's listen to the governors now.
Services, and right now there's no desire at the federal government to do that. They're not fulfilling their obligations. They're not getting the work done. They're not doing any of that. They're focusing on these issues.
You both have spent years of your lives, raised millions of dollars for the Democratic Party, spent years, devoted to the Democratic Party. Do you think you are getting enough support from your fellow Democrats, both in Chicago and as you try to do your work here? And, in terms of your laying out, what you're really laying out is an emergency situation. Do you think the party is doing enough to tackle this?
Well, look,
I stare at each other. Yeah, I saw that look.
We got a pool going. Who gets arrested first? And I don't know who's. I don't know who's leading.
Yeah.
No, look, I think people are trying to respond to this. This is maybe Newsom. So.
But do you think
look,
you're getting enough support?
Everybody's trying to figure this out and trying to govern and trying to react to this new reality. And the bar just keeps pulling down. The bar just keeps changing on this. And I ask all of you to please do, I hear Obama does this a lot, imagine a Democratic president sending the Illinois National Guard to rural Texas because we don't like the way things are going. It's the argument I keep making that one of the strongest Second Amendment arguments that Second Amendment adherents said was we need to keep our firearms to protect against the tyrant of a federal government in our cities. I guess, I don't know. So I think people are trying to adjust to this. They're trying to get it done. I get asked questions, should you keep your head low? Are you making Minnesota a target? You make us a target if we acquiesce to what is not normal and what is moving towards authoritarianism. If I disagree with his tax policies, that's a very different thing.
But you don't think there's any...
And so I think resistance is hard. I want to tell you, I keep hearing this, is the Democratic Party doing enough? The fix to this is the conservative Republican business party that always operated there needs to stand up and say, this is not who we are. This was the party of states' rights. This was the party of low federal interaction into our communities. These were the folks that were talking about law and order, not outside of this. And these were the folks that said no more wars. I heard him to say no more wars also meant here, too. No more wars in America. And so I want to make the case on this. Can the Democratic Party do more? Yes. Look, I'm Exhibit A. Had we done more last fall, we wouldn't be in this situation. So I'll acquiesce to that. We need to figure that piece out. But right now, as it stands, we just need a half dozen Republican senators to stand up and say enough is enough, follow the law. Taking our money, like pulling money that was authorized, appropriated, and given to the states because you don't want us, as we already made plans to move towards the most renewable energy grid to lower prices for Minnesotans. Now they're taking our money back, and it's incredibly disruptive. So I think there's more we can do. But I think you're kidding ourselves if you think that the Democrats are just going to come up with a slogan that this is unfair, Donald Trump should quit it. He's not going to quit it. The way it's done is the folks that are nearest to him say, this is not how things are done in America. And you think he's kidding when he talks about wanting to run again? You think he built a ballroom so that J.B. Pritzker, when he moves in, can have that ballroom? So, no, he built it for himself. So,
I mean, are you optimistic Republicans are going to do that?
I am more hopeful than you think. Because I think what I hear, and maybe Governor Pritzker could talk about this, what I hear away from the cameras and away from others is also a reasonableness from folks. And I will say that here and give kudos to the folks here. We have the most evenly divided legislature in the country, and Republicans and Democrats got to the table and passed a budget together, compromised. Most of us, we didn't get what we wanted. We didn't get it all. They did it. They did it. And I don't want to normalize and say, well, everybody should just get along. There's some people you can't get along with. And I think that's the problem that I have, that there's no way what I say if Donald Trump's going to listen to it. But I would say, as Governor Pritzker said, if Governor Abbott said, I got to tell you, Mr. President, this is wrong, and I don't want you to send Texas National Guard troops to Illinois. That's all he has to say. And that changes this entire dynamic. But he didn't say it.
Or just hold up the letter that he signed last year.
Yeah, that.
To hand that to the president. In answer to your question, I will say, I think there are too many elected leaders in the Democratic Party who think that we're in some slightly abnormal world, but they think that there are guardrails and that somehow we'll get through this and then we'll just, fix it. And the reality, I don't know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I can tell you that I sat alongside Holocaust survivors for 10 years to build the Illinois Holocaust Museum. And one thing that I learned from them is that you can't wait. When you are fighting, tyranny, and that is what we're talking about here, that you have to stand up and speak out. They insisted in building this museum that when we talk to particularly young people, and that's really what this museum is mostly about, when we talk to young people, they say, we've got to challenge young people who come into the museum to ask themselves, who are you? Are you a collaborator? Are you a bystander? Are you a rescuer? Or are you an upstander? An upstander being something even more than a rescuer, somebody who's willing to stand up and speak out. You might rescue too, but it's speaking out at a moment when it might be perilous to do so. That doing that has the biggest positive effect. And I think that is a question that everybody's got to ask themselves, but especially Democrats who are willing to ask themselves that question, because I think most people want to be upstanders. Most people want to do the right thing, and this is the moment. It was easy, when things were easy. It's not easy now to choose to be an upstander, but this is exactly the moment for people to stand up. And do I see enough people doing it? No, I don't, and I'm surprised. I'll be honest, I'm surprised. I thought that by March or April, that we would have seen more and more leaders, and I'm talking about business leaders and university leaders as well as Democratic leaders, just folks. I thought more people would be standing up and speaking out. And yes, we've got No Kings rallies, and there's a woman. I just want to tell you a quick story about a woman in southern Illinois, in Edwardsville, Illinois, 28,000 people in Edwardsville. This woman in February looked at what Donald Trump was doing already and could not stand it and didn't know what to do. And this is, Edwardsville is generally in an area that's red and votes Republican, but she was outraged by what Trump was doing. Even then, she didn't know what to do. And so she made a sign, and protesting. And she went and stood at the at the intersection of two state highways, and held up a sign protesting by herself. Somebody came by with their dog and said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm just outraged. This is what I can do." And the person stood there with her that day. And then the next day, 4 of her friends showed up. And then the next day, 8 people showed up. And now every Friday since then, about 200 to 300 people show up to protest in that location. I think first of all, that gives me hope. But second, I would like it to be 1,000 people. I would like it that if people would show up all the time, and it means doing anything and everything social media, write a letter, show up at the Republican congressman's office and ask him why you voted for that big ugly bill that's going to take away your rural health care. I mean, everything you can do right now is the moment to be the upstander.
Well, I think some of it, particularly for the business leaders, the university leaders.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. We will be returning to this conversation. You saw that the governors had kind of pivoted a little bit from the direct commentary about the arrest to the deployment of the National Guard, and then in general their thoughts on the state of the country and what they see folks need to do in their eyes. We're going to be back in 2 minutes. We will rejoin this conversation as we have left it kind of just a few moments ago. Welcome back, folks, to Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus. We're going to rejoin this panel where we've got Governor of Minnesota Tim Walz alongside Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. We most recently left off with this dialogue as they were talking about the ongoing push to deploy the National Guard, and there are now kind of larger discussions that they're having about the state of the country and what they were hoping to see from Americans during this time. Let's listen back in.
Last time, and you watch these documentaries, always wondering what it looked like as you slipped away from democracy to more autocratic government, but how quickly you slip back, you can switch from, and they usually don't come without some struggle in them, but there are those times when we switch back. I can still remember in that fall of '89 when the Berlin Wall fell, and many of us who grew up in that, all of a sudden it was there and then it was gone, and then we had a reunified Germany, we had a movement towards that. So it's there, and I would just encourage people, this is the time. Are they going to target you? Yes, yes. And should we keep our heads down? So here's what I think, just to be honest with you. You know that this big ugly bill that decimated health care, and then afterwards they heard so much blowback, especially on rural health care, and there's mostly a lot of rural members that are in the Congress because that's our divide in this country, rural-urban. Those rural members said, you got to do something, so he put in $50 billion. What do you think the chance that Illinois and Minnesota are going to get their share of that $50 billion as opposed to North Dakota and South Dakota? And, that's where we're at now. So we have to go bend the knee to get our tax dollars back in a system that's set up to be run by laws.
And by the way, the cuts were $150 billion. They made this whole fund of $50 billion. Said, see, we're giving money to rural hospitals.
But you joked about who's going to be arrested first. Do you both believe that you could sincerely be arrested?
Yes.
I'm asking any of you to come visit me in the gulag in El Salvador.
Yes, I think in
You
all
do.
seriousness, yes.
You're a
You saw the
yes.
thing
You're
with
a
James
yes, it
Comey.
sounds like, yeah.
You see the same with James Comey. You see the representative who went
Yes.
to a detention facility, member of Congress, and look, they drug Governor Pritzker, myself, and Governor Hochul of New York in front of Congress. And I said, I don't think people notice this, the decorum of being a former member of Congress, which Governor Hochul and I were, but 3 sitting governors, 2 of them former members of Congress, being brought back to testify in front of Congress. I'm not this up or whatever, but the decorum is you would never swear in those governors because it's the respect given to someone who served in that institution. And not only did they swear us in, they spent the time belittling on things that had nothing to do with why they're there. So yes, I think it's how easy, and I have not seen any. Again, where are the Republican dissenters? And again, this example that the governor gave, Governor Abbott and all of the Republican governors were 100% on board that Joe Biden was misusing the National Guard by transferring the Space Force out of the National Guard into the active force. And by doing so, they made it clear that they believed in states' rights. They believed that we should do this together, and now they're perfectly silent. So this whole thing is well, you know, kind of both sides do it. They do not. I, as the co-chair of the Council of Governors, chastised a Democratic president because it was an overreach of where the states should have been responsible, and now we hear nothing. With that being the case, are they going to stand up for us? These are folks, my friends. I will say this. There was one member of Congress that day who said, I know the governor. I was friends with him. I disagree on this. A Republican member said that. He said, but I won't say anything here because it's not the right thing to do. I'll talk to him offline. So I hold out some hope, but unless they speak up. And again, if you think you're getting out of this, it's that old adage. They're going to come for immigrants. They're going to come for the Democrats. They're going to come for you eventually. So just your time will come.
But I want to point out, and you know, in private, there are some Republicans in our legislature who are actually, you know, decent and will talk to me, and they don't like Trump. They're concerned about where the future is. They won't say any of that publicly, of course. And the real test of that was that that there was, you know, when CBP and ICE showed up in Chicago, they brought with them right-wing social media influencers with cameras, right? I mean, literally had them embedded with them. So, but one of them came to my house and filmed in front of my house, essentially calling me the enemy and telling people that I'm the cause of, this was around the Charlie Kirk murder, and that I'm the cause of political violence, or I'm the cause of Charlie Kirk's murder. And doing that in front of my house. And so right after that occurred, and it appeared online on his social media, I called the leaders of the Republicans in the legislature, and I said to them, I hope that you will speak out against this, that you will say something. This is wrong. This is wrong. And if it were happening in front of your house, if it was the opposite, and it was happening in front of your house, and someone essentially threatened you or created a situation where other people might attack you, that, you know, that we Democrats would, I would stand up for you. I hope you would stand up for me. Neither one of them. I asked them simply to post something publicly or put a statement out, anything. It seems like just common decency to just say this is wrong. And they wouldn't do it. And there's so much fear among Republicans in particular. And it shouldn't be that there are Democrats that are afraid. Because you know what? We're the targets. We need to be strong. We need to fight back. And there needs to be more of it.
I think the other reason, though, some Democrats are more quiet, perhaps, is because of the election, right? They're trying to game this out politically. What do you guys think the outlook will be for Democrats politically next year? You're both running for third terms.
Yeah, well, I think in any normal world, when you've got the soybean markets collapsing, you have folks deeply concerned. We are losing jobs. We'll never know for sure because we just get rid of the folks who measure those things at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You see an economy that's fragile. You see our allies deeply concerned. You see, you know, continuous disruptions. Usually what happens in that is people go out and vote the other way. I think Governor Pritzker made the point on this is there's a reason that they're gerrymandering Texas is that they're going to lose the House. That is going to happen, so you got to try to game the system. There's a reason that they want to make it harder to vote by mail because a lot of Democrats like to vote by mail because it's more efficient and works. So I believe we're going to win, but I think it's going to be closer than it should be because of the thumb on the scale. I think it's critical that we do win so that there is a check and balances that goes into that. But I would go back to JB saying this is that we need, Republicans, not elected Republicans, old school Republicans out there who recognize, when did you think it was okay for the United States government to own U.S. Steel? When did you think it was okay to have a command economy where the government owns this? All this screaming about us being socialists, for God's sakes, this guy is the most successful socialist president we've seen in buying up businesses and controlling that. And imagine as a governor, if I would threaten an individual business like we see by this because they don't adhere to the things that I want. It's unheard of. And I think we get so comfortable in here trying to, I got to be fair, I got to manage this out or whatever. There's no fairness to that. And so I think watching the election is going to be a real challenge because there's going to be a tendency, as JB said, well, this is just a normal election we got going on here, and we got to just kind of make sure we're fair. We're giving too much, positive to this side, we get over here. I think there is a cynicism of the both sidesism. And again, in owning some of this, we got to give people a reason that we're not just opposed to this guy because he's awful on this. We've got some real solutions for things like housing. We got some real solutions for things like child care. We got some real solutions around energy costs and renewables and really get those out there. And I would make the case that Kamala Harris did that last year, pointing out very clearly that Project 2025 was real when he told us he didn't know about it. We knew he was, but also talked about $25,000 down payment assistance for housing, home care, using Medicaid. Instead of cutting Medicaid, we use Medicaid to allow home care for our parents and make life easier for all of us. Those were things that were out there. We have to focus simultaneously on both, and it's going to be a challenge.
Was there something you think Democrats didn't understand in that race about the politics of the Midwest? You're both Midwestern governors. They lost that blue wall. You lost that blue wall states.
You want me to offer criticism of our national ticket?
Well, not criticism, reflection.
You can write a book.
Some time has passed. Yeah. Perhaps everyone's done a little soul searching.
Look, I think elections are honestly about
Democrats
things that
about
are
the Midwest.
I think the elections in general are about the kitchen table issues. I mean, the things that matter to people every day. I've often said, especially recently, that this election coming up is not going to be about democracy. It just isn't. It wasn't going to be in 2024 either. I was critical, actually, when Joe Biden was still the candidate and he gave a speech in Valley Forge. I publicly criticized him, but I didn't go to that speech. I was invited, didn't go, because I knew it was a speech about democracy. It was a terrific speech, and he's right about everything he said. The thing is, he wanted to make that the theme of his campaign. And I've knocked on a lot of doors and asked people to vote for me or for other people. And I can tell you that if I knocked on 100 doors, 5 people would tell me that democracy is the most important issue to them. Everybody else will tell you it's about paying the bills, the electric bills, it's about the grocery prices, it's about putting your kid through college or making sure they get a good job, or you yourself getting a better job and a better wage. That is what people really care about. I mean, I hate that we have to talk about democracy, but for God's sakes, we're not going to win an election if there is no election. And so we got to fight to preserve democracy in order to win the election. And what we ought to be talking about, Tim just said it, it's about, can you afford the things that really matter in your life? And if you can't afford an apartment, if you can't afford a house, if you can't afford your groceries, nothing else really matters. I mean, quick story, I went to Argentina when I was young. I was about 23. I was working on Capitol Hill for a really great United States senator. I got invited on this trip that was half Democrats, half Republicans, to learn about Argentina's political system. It was a democracy at the time, and we landed in Buenos Aires, and immediately there was a military coup. I didn't cause it, I promise. But we landed, and we went to the hotel where we were staying, and we were watching on TV, on CNN, everything that was happening in Argentina, and it was a little scary, but we had to take a vote. By the way, between Democrats and Republicans, all of us together, were we going to go to the embassy and wait it out? Or were we going to go into the streets where there was going to be a democracy rally? Well, the vote was all the Republicans voted to go to the embassy. All the Democrats voted to go rally in the streets. I tell you this story because when we went to the rally in the streets, and we all did, we found a place that was a little above this is the Plaza de Mayo in Buenos Aires, and there were hundreds of thousands of people there. And people were, chanting, and they were, standing up for democracy, and they had big banners standing up for their political parties and so on. And in the middle of all of it, there was a guy pushing an ice cream cart, selling popsicles and ice cream. You know what? He almost didn't care what kind of a government there was, because he had to take money home to put food on the table. And I take the lesson from that a little bit is, it's not that he didn't care, it's that his number one priority was making sure that he could feed his family. And that, I think, is a good lesson for today, for every day, about winning elections. We need to be talking about and focused on affordability. And Tim and I both, I've looked at his record. This man has delivered for Minnesota. And I'm so proud to be his friend. And we together in our respective states, I think we've done a whole lot of things for working people, for middle class, for vulnerable people in our states, because that's who we are as Democrats, and we need to show that and make sure that everybody knows that we deliver. And in Washington, D.C., shutdown is a great example. Nothing's happening, right? And we really haven't seen much action for working people for too many years from Washington, D.C. Democrats in the states, in my view, are actually delivering, and we need to show that off to bring back the Democratic Party.
The governor did a great job of this. What he explained to you was, teachers in this room know, it's Maslow's hierarchy. And Democrats get stuck on self-actualization. You need to solve climate change, but you can't worry about climate change if you can't pay the bills. And they have to go hand in hand, so he's not wrong. I would just say on this, the conversation we had here, this is not going to win the election, but it is certainly going to motivate a base to get out there. So I think JB's exactly right. We have to be able to cross the spectrum to make the case about democracy, but you can't lead with it. It's got to be the others.
That sounded awfully like a campaign speech.
I'm running for re-election.
You're running for re-election. You're both running for re-election.
Yes.
You've said that if you get elected to a third term, you won't run for president again in 28. Is that true?
That's true. I will visit JB Pritzker when he
and
is
will
there.
and Governor Pritzker, will you make a similar promise?
Whatever I decide, honestly, is going to be about what I think is best for the people of Illinois and nothing else. I love the job that I have. I do. Being governor of Illinois, I wouldn't be running for a third term if I didn't. I also am running for a third term, I think maybe similar to Tim, although he should speak for himself, because I do not feel like I can abandon the people of my state in this moment, especially with Donald Trump as president, with this MAGA Congress. Someone's got to stand up for the people of Illinois, and I feel like I have the experience to do that, and I've accomplished a lot for them, and I believe I can protect people mostly from what is coming down from the MAGA Congress and Donald Trump's presidency.
So this conversations were sort of winding down. It certainly was pretty dark at times. And I'm just reminded about how 14 months ago you were running a campaign of joy. It was sort of peak joy. Where is the joy in politics?
All right, folks, our time here on Live Impact is coming to a close in just a few moments. Just a reminder, we do continue to keep an eye on the very latest with the breaking international news that we've been following, potential headway with the peace talks that could end that war that's been underway for 2 years in Gaza. Speaking of which, live look right now from Gaza as we are awaiting to hear more in the sense that we know that at some point there could be the release of hostages in the coming days, perhaps this weekend, perhaps early next week. We're hearing conflicting updates from various officials. We also know the president has intentions to travel to the Middle East in the coming days as well. We'll have the very latest for you at 11 here on WCNC Plus.